will be primarily be on the KNR, which is the metering coding from by Eskom, as well as then some updates from the minister in relation to the integrated energy plan, the IRP 2023, and its finalization thereof. So colleagues, without further ado, I wish to invite the minister to the podium so that we commence with today's briefing.
Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much, Tsakani. And just once more to thank the members of the media for taking time to be with us this morning so that we are able to inform the rest of the country the developments in the energy or electricity space in this instance. As Tsakani has indicated, I think we will be focusing on the update in relation to the integrated resource plan, which is a comprehensive articulation of, if you like, the fuel sources that will be powering the South African economy going into the future. So we will just share with you where we at in relation to the finalization of that very publicly intense process. But before I do that, I just want to say one or two things. So the first thing is just to encourage South Africans to participate in the NERSA process of price determination or tariff determination. As we know that Eskom has made an application to NERSA. So the expectation is that that process or that application is now subjected to an intense public participation, public scrutiny in line with the transparency in the determination of the tariff. And that exercise is executed by NERSA, which is our energy regulator. So it's important that everyone that has got views, is aggrieved, has got proposals, gets to subject himself or herself to that process and make those submissions. These are in-person submissions, and I'm sure that people can also make written submissions. So it's important to ensure that the process is robust, the process is democratic, and we're able to take the multiplicity of views from industry players, households, whoever is interested in this process. I think we have to subject ourselves to that process. That process is accommodating. You can articulate in your own language so that we get to hear the cries, in fact, of our people, but also what the proposals are, to the extent that people have got ideas on how best to address the issues of runaway price increases of electricity. I've made the point that as government, we will be fashioning interventions to ensure that we provide relief. It's still a process that is underway inside government. Before NERSA made that determination, would have made our submissions. I want to say with a degree of confidence that we will get to a situation where we don't realize a 40% tariff increase. It should be something significantly lower than that, taking into account the need for the industry to be competitive, the pressures that the households are experiencing. We have committed ourselves at the 7th administration that one of our 3 priority areas of this administration is to ensure that we fight poverty and reduce the cost of living. And we know that the cost of utilities, water and electricity is a big component of the spending of households, and in fact it's more disproportionate when you go to low-income households. So there's those set of measures, and at the right time I'll announce to you. It's an engagement that is happening internally. I'm leading it. The president has directed it must happen. So I want to say to the rest of the country that rest assured, we will be making intervention that will provide significant amount of relief. What that percentage is, NERSA will make the determination. We will subject to that process. And then simultaneously, will not undermine the ability of Eskom to continue to operate as a going concern. I think some of the assumptions and the basis of the application of Eskom has got some justification. So we think we can do both. ESCOM continues a going concern, not undermine, if you like, ESCOM's ability to execute on its mandate, and on the other side, the need for us to provide some degree of relief to households and industry. So I'm confident that we'll find that. And like I said, we will announce to you what those measures are, and then we'll to the extent that they are of a policy nature, we'll make firm articulations and then make that known to NERSA, and then they will be able to accommodate that into their process. So at the right time, I'll come back and make that announcement. But what is important is that all of us, at least those who can, let's please subject ourselves to this process. Let's submit to this process so that we allow NERSA an opportunity to have the benefit of the multiplicity of views. Just another update in relation to the performance of the system. So yesterday was a milestone. Yesterday was a milestone in that the 19th of November marks a record in our response to the load shedding question. So we recorded on the 19th of November the longest stretch of uninterrupted power supply in 5 years. So what does this statement mean? Two things. The first one is that, of course, load shedding is still an area that requires intervention. I did say to the country that at the right time, when we are meant to call it, we'll call it that is over. But I'm not in that situation to make that firm pronouncement. I can't make that absolute statement. I had said previously that I'll share with you the honest truth. The system is performing exceptionally well, exceeding our own expectations. We can see that we are sustaining this momentum. So what that statement says is that it's the longest period of uninterrupted power supply. So the statement is carefully crafted not to suggest that we can say in absolute terms that load shedding is over. But the second message that this statement is conveying is that the interventions now are resilient. By that I mean, even if you have a cluster of units failing, the system is able to carry itself without us having to resort to load shedding. So that's important, because it means that we have built some degree of headspace to allow for incidents where clusters of units fail. The system can still carry itself without us having to interrupt, if you like, businesses and also the experiences at the household level. So it's important that there's an appreciation that this work has proved itself to be resilient, and in fact we want to sustain this momentum going into the future. So I think that's it's an important point to make. And of course, in the numbers you can see that the unplanned capacity loss factor, so we've been able to drastically reduce, if you like, the amount of megawatts that are not available at any given time as a result of the units failing on their own, the unreliability of the units, and also the inefficiencies. A comparable period last time, we're sitting at about 16,400 megawatts not available at any given time. So you can see now we're averaging about 11,235 megawatts. So it means there's a delta or a difference of 5,000 megawatts. So there's an improvement of that 5,000 megawatts of the same period last year. So from an energy availability factor, so this marks an improvement of about 7.3 percentage points. So that's significant. Just in numbers to bring it back home, so that there's a general appreciation of the kind of progress we have made. We have spent 15 billion rands less than what was the case last year. So that's significant. So that's significant going into the future, because these savings are going to be factored into the cost of electricity supply. So going into the future, we know that the primary energy, we're able to reduce that cost by 15 billion. And in fact, we think that going forward, we're going to get much, much closer to that 70% EAF, which we have marked for March of 2025. I think that we're on course to achieve that. And we're doing this as we maintain the health of the system. So we're not compromising on our planned maintenance. So you can see in terms of our summer outlook, we are consistent, so we're at about 7,000 megawatts, 6,900 megawatts of planned maintenance. So it's important that there's that appreciation that as planned maintenance go up, as we go into the summer period, demands going down, the system, the improvement still continues relentlessly. So we're able to see that, in fact, this is something that is resilient, and we want to congratulate the team at Eskom for the exceptional work that they are doing, ensuring that there's a reliability of the system. Now, on the more substantive update, two of these updates. The first one is on the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan. So what does the plan seek to do? The plan has to achieve three things. So the first one is that it must ensure that we achieve conditions of security of electricity supply. So you know that in the past few years we have had major challenges on the generation side, and we're not able to sustain or keep the promise of the security of electricity supply. And I make the point that with the kind of improvements that we're making, we're getting to a stage where we can say with a degree of confidence that indeed we have reached conditions where we can guarantee security of electricity supply, and also to allow the kind of economic growth that is expected. You know that some of the projections that are in the public domain from the most reputable institutions like the Bureau of Economic Research based in Stellenbosch is that if we were to continue with the improvements with regards to electricity, the improvements on the logistics side, which have been the structural constraint to the South African economy, and be aggressive on the execution of the Operation Vulindlela reforms, we can reach a GDP of about 3.5% in the next 2 years. For us to be able to achieve that, you need security of supply, and that's why it's important that we are building on that. And then the second thing that we need to do is to minimize the cost of electricity to the economy. So it's one thing to have the electricity available. It's quite another for people to be able to afford it. And that's why I'm encouraging South Africans to subject themselves to that public consultation process that is being overseen by NERSA, so that we are able to make the necessary submission. But of course, when you reconfigure the aggregate mix of the sources of energy, we know that solar and wind, they provide, if you like, the cheapest form of electricity. You'll see that going into the future, we're expecting an exponential increase of their share in the aggregate mix. Of course, base load is important. Here I'm talking coal, I'm talking gas to power, I'm referring to nuclear and hydro. They are going to be significant components of that mix. So the point we're making is that it's not a binary conversation. It's not one over the other, but is their share of the mix. And the aggregate distribution of the mix must be such that you are able to realize the affordability of electricity. So it's an important part of that. And then the last element is that you minimize impact of electricity supply to the environment. So the point we're making there, so it's carefully crafted. You are accepting that there's going to be some adverse impact to the environment. So the point is to show that as a result of your action, you also accommodate interventions that are meant to ensure that you minimize the adverse impact to the environment. So you must do all of the above. So it's not just doing one, but do all of the above, and that's what the IRP seeks to do. And of course, what we do in that exercise, we are able to project the demand going into the future, and of course, we are making a number of assumptions in that demand. Some of those assumptions, the underlying assumption is the rate of growth of the South African economy and what it will take for us to support that growth of the economy. And then having done that, then you are then take stock of the fact that this is available generation capacity. So you ask the question, will this available capacity be able to meet that demand? And in many instances, you'll find that it's not sufficient. Then you ask the question, where am I going to find this new generation to be able to support this demand? And then you start to generate options in relation to where these sources of new generation will come from. Of course, it's anchored on a primary assumption, the rate of growth, the the levelized cost of energy from one source to the other. You make all of those assumptions, and then you put all of these things into a mathematical model. So that's science, the science of it. So you put it into a mathematical model, and that model then churns out what the model think should be, if you like, the distribution or the allocation of the various sources of energy as part of that mix. So that's an exercise that we had undertaken, and then we have gone out to the general public to ask for comments. We gazetted the IRP in the 4th of January this year, and then we received substantive comments, I must say. These comments were over 4,300 received from various parties across the length and breadth of the country. Of these 4,000 plus comments, 136 were substantive. So there are people who were challenging a number of aspects or making suggestions on how best you can improve this model. And that's why it's important that we're able to enter into that stakeholder engagement. We had 3 rounds of these engagements, starting from the 9th of January, but we also created multiple platforms of engagement. You didn't have to physically present yourself. We also created an opportunity for a virtual engagement so that we are able to maximize the participation of people, those who couldn't get to these areas of engagement. And it ranges from the stakeholders, civil society, business, but also academia, government institutions made their own submissions in terms of how we should treat this IRP. And then we constituted a team led by Sanedi. Sanedi, as Takane has indicated, the South African National Energy Development Institute. I mean, it's a repository of, it's a think tank, a repository of skills in the electricity and energy space that have got an appreciation of the science that underpins this. So we asked them to say, look, these are the submissions we have received. Please package them into various themes and let's see what is coming out so that we are able to provide the necessary response or accommodate some of these, if you like, submissions to the extent that we find them to be acceptable. So they were saying there are 8 key themes that are coming out of the IRP. The first one has to do with issues around the process, how you report, and the implementation of the IRP. And then the second one was of the thematic areas that came out of this 133 plus substantive submissions was, look, so in some areas the submissions are claiming that there's misalignment between policy goals and what the IRP suggests to be its objectives or intervention or the aggregate of the mix. And then the other one, of course, which is key also, is about the underlying assumption, the modeling, the methodology, and the kind of costs that are assumed in that IRP. And remember, in the IRP, we generated 2 horizons. The horizons up to 2030, and that horizons really was anchored on the fact that there was significant deficit in the generation of electricity relative to the demand, so a situation of load shedding. And that assumption was saying that you are likely going to end this load shedding by 2027, and therefore you required extraordinary interventions that are not normal, above your normal, because you are resolving a crisis. And then it had the second horizon, 2030 until and beyond, until 2050. Of course, as I sit with you before you now, that horizon 1 essentially is being eliminated because we are not sitting here with conditions of load shedding. But it's something that will come out of the final IRP. And then it's issues of energy technologies, and then it also talks about the balance between your climate change commitments. You know that we have committed to the reduction of anything between 350 to 420 million tons of CO2 equivalent annually going into the future as part of our nationally determined contribution. And I was saying that the mixture or the aggregate complexion of the IRP does not respond to that. So there's a misalignment there. So it's something that required the intervention. And then they were saying, out of that, then you are making certain proposals and pathways, and they were challenging some of those pathways. And then the one thing that did not find expression in the version that had gone out is the cost and the impact of transmission and distribution in relation to the objective of the IRP. And you are going to find that now we are lifting this as an area of intervention. it's something that had not received attention. So that's something that we are going to focus on. So I want to say that now, what are the next steps? So the next step is that we are deepening that conversation. So I'm not starting the public consultation. I said there were 133 substantive submissions. So we're going back to those people who have made those substantive submissions, having done some degree of revision on the back of the submissions that we have received, and say, look, you have made this following articulation, you have made the following claims, you have made the following argument, this is how we propose to accommodate it, and then we're going to have that engagement. We'll have a physical engagement here in Johannesburg from sometime from next week, and then we'll also have the targeted engagements, virtual. I'm saying targeted because we're not starting a new process. We are going back to the people who had made the initial submissions, and then we consolidate those inputs, and then a report gets to be generated. Then I carry it to cabinet, and then now we have our IRP that is going to guide our work going to the future. So I thought that is important that there is that appreciation. And then the second substantive briefing I want to give is the work that Eskom has been doing with regards to what we call the key revision number, KRRN. So essentially is the need for you to recode your meter. So I must say that Eskom has done tremendously well. They've gone out into the public domain. They've been doing this for the past 6 to 8 months, where they've been intensifying that messaging to the communities, at least in the past 3 months. And we know that, of course, there's a need for us to update this. So there's a timestamp on this prepaid meters. So the point I want to make is that it is up to the 25th, the 24th. Yeah. The 24th, that's when the Sunday, that's when we are expected to ensure that everyone is recorded. Now, people are coming across and saying, no, but can you extend it? It's not extendable. That's the point I want to make. It's a technical issue. We can't extend it. So it's a hard stop. The 24th, if you have not recorded, then you are sitting with a different problem. So if you replenish your units based on the obsolete system, then you can't load them. And also you're sitting with another problem, is that now when we recode, there's no need for us to substitute the meter. But beyond the 24th, we have to physically remove the meter, and that comes at a cost. It's a significant cost, and that cost must be borne by the consumer, because we have done everything possible. But I guess the bigger cost is that you won't have electricity. So it's not a function of whether you have the money or the means, but it's simply that the meter will not be able to accept those tokens. So I think it's important that we are able to do that. So the base date, 1993, is going to run out of range in 2024. That's the technical specification. Like I said, it's got a timestamp. It's ending on the 24th of November 2024. We can't extend it. It's a technical issue. There's very little we can do. But of course, Eskom can't be blamed for the extensive amount of work that the team has done. And we're intensifying that. And the team has been intensifying it. But we thought we must lift it at this level so that there's an appreciation. I do anticipate that come the 25th, there will be people lining up, protesting, expressing grievance. We are saying that we still have another 4 days to do this exercise. And Eskom has overextended itself to accommodate households. We know where the concentration of the people who have not updated is geographically. So we are going to allocate resources relative to the concentration of what is outstanding so that we are able to address this. So Eskom will stop dispensing the KRN1 electricity tokens, thus making the meters will be inactive from that time. So it's important that we have that appreciation. So if a customer meter has not been recoded to KRN2, which is a new generation now going into the future, just accept that your tokens will not be accepted and purchased. So essentially you are sitting with a situation where you just don't have access to electricity. And for us to be able to ensure that you have electricity going into the future, now it's a long queue. Because now it's not the remotely recoding. As you buy, we recode remotely, and then you punch the numbers. The meter must physically be removed. It takes time, and of course there's a cost, and that cost will be borne by the consumer. So I really want to encourage households, consumers, to ensure that we do exactly this. We are extending ourselves, made ourselves available over extended hours, so that we are able to address this situation. I want to make the point that Eskom has successfully pre-coded about 6.9 million prepaid meters to ensure that customers are able to continue to buy. I'm making this point to dispel the myth that this program only starts now. It's something that has been happening over time. And let me tell you, these 6.9 million people did not have to be reminded. All they had to do was to go and purchase, replenish their units. So people who are the majority of people, a significant number of people who are outside this number are generally zero buyers. What is a zero buyer? Someone has got a prepaid meter, has been consuming, but has never bought the unit from Eskom. Or in the past 6 to 8 months, the person has never bought. So it means that there's another means of them replenishing the meters. So this is another way. What this helps us to do, just a coincidence, is revenue protection. Revenue protection to Eskom, revenue protection to municipalities. Of course, I'm announcing the program of Eskom. I'm sure municipalities are doing the same. So we want to bring everyone into the fold. So there can't be another black market arrangement. What this does, it eliminates it. So what other people have been doing, they've been going through that arrangement. And that arrangement now is exposed. Because if you had gone to presented yourself at Eskom to replenish, you didn't have to be reminded. Automatically, as they give you the new code, as you go and punch it, then you are part of the new dispensation. So generally, it's people who have not presented themselves. It's generally people who have not been paying. It's generally people who are contributing to what we call non-technical losses. So it's generally people that we colloquially refer to as Izinyo. So these people are undermining the financial sustainability of municipalities and Eskom, and someone is paying on their behalf. Who's paying on their behalf? It's all of us who are paying for our electricity bills on a monthly basis. So I think it's important that we have that appreciation. Yes, there are instances of perhaps failures, instances of capacity at Eskom sites, instances of elderly people who doesn't have necessary knowledge and technical know-how of how to do this. That's the kind of support we have been providing, and we are going to escalate that support. But then there's that crowd I'm referring to that essentially is undermining the revenue base of Eskom and municipalities. And it is that crowd that is contributing to this runaway tariff cost, because in that tariff, Eskom builds into that tariff application what we call bad debts. So this money that we can't collect, the fact that I'm generating, I'm producing, I'm selling, but I'm not getting back what is due to me, that gets to be paid somewhere. So this burden is carried by everyone. That's the point I want to make. So for those that are experiencing technical challenges, in instances where people have been queuing, we've rectified that. There's going to be pop-up, if you like, centers. We know where the concentration is. Like I said, we'll match our capacity to areas where we know that there's some difficulty. We will use all types of media, social platform, media platform, whatever you call it, to reach out. But the point I'm saying that from the 25th, then if you have not recorded, you are sitting in a different problem. And in fact, you are likely going to be sitting in the dark. So it's important that we have that appreciation. We want to urge consumers, customers to go and present themselves. We'll announce, definitely will expand on this, on some of the work that we are doing to encourage people to come and update their meters so that you are able to continue to be able to buy from Eskom, from your municipalities. I'm sure those that are supplied by municipalities will announce that program for as long as it's on this system, this first generation version of meters. You are going to be subjected to that process. We are calling on everyone to ensure that they submit to that. So as part of this effort, we have already sent about messages to about 4.9 million people. Like I said, there's 2.1 million people who have not yet migrated. These are 2.1 million people as of yesterday who stand the risk in the next 5 days, or at least from Monday, not to have access to electricity. This is a 2.1 million consumers who are going to bear the cost of the replacement of that meter. This is the 2.1 million people who must wait for the meter to be available to be installed before they get this electricity. So we're saying that you don't have to go through that stress. Please subject yourself to this process. We still have another 4 or 5 days for us to do that. And then, like I said, what we have been able to reveal is that those who are sitting with this problem, I want to emphasize, is people who likely have not been purchasing electricity for the past 6 months. They have not bought. They have got a prepaid. They have never bought. But they have electricity. So just reconcile those. And I'm making this point because someone must pay. That person who's paying is the diligent customers. I was listening to someone saying, yeah, hey, why is there another renotile? That's the language we use. Yeah, that is fine. Come and present yourself. And then you are now on the right path. I think it's important that we are able to make this point so that we bring everyone into the fold. And those who have been running a scam, who have been selling this, I'm sure we'll take them out of business. And what ESCOM will do in municipalities to ensure that we are ahead of the curve, because we know they are planning on how to bypass this next generation of meters. So we should be ahead of those who want to undermine the ability of the state to execute and provide services, and essentially throwing us back and undermining our ability to be able to execute. So I really want to encourage citizens that subject yourself to this process. The 2.1 million, it's a huge number. So you can see, I mean, if we are left with 4 days, so it means that on average we should be connecting about 500,000 people a day. So you can imagine, that's a huge task. That's a huge tall order. And that's what it's important that we are able to maximize. Because it could be the case that if the 2.1 million people present, or half of them just present themselves on the last day, we will not necessarily have the capacity to be able to recode. So that's important that we are able to have that appreciation. The earlier, the better. Of course, the 4.9 million have already done it. Is this 2.1 million? Remember, I'm talking about the ESCOM customers. Then there's another set of customers that are sitting with municipalities, and I'm sure municipalities will be able to articulate on that. So I thought that on the IRP, just to give you a sense, we're at the tail end, finalizing the substantive comments the week of next week, and then by end of November, the IRP is ready. Take it to Parliament, to Cabinet, and then we get to publicize it, and then we're asking for communities to please subject themselves to this exercise of recoding so that we are not in the dark starting the 25th. Thank you very much, Tara.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think the Minister has really taken to task to address this issue because it is quite an issue. Daphne will attest to it. Our office, there's a lady called Penelope Mahlangu, who I refer many calls to, who can attest to this issue. So to reiterate the Minister's messaging today is that can we please just do the right thing and subject ourselves to the process. So colleagues, with that said, we'll open the platform to questions. The Minister, as well as the panel that is joining the Minister, is ready to respond and provide clarity to whatever questions that you may have. So as we proceed with that session, by a show of hands, when you are recognized, please introduce yourself and the media house that you represent. I will start with yourself, followed by the lady, and then there's a gentleman who had his hand up as well. Are there any other hands? There's Katleo, and then there's Terence. So in that order, we'll take those 5 hands for this first round, which will be followed by a second round after the responses.
Minister from Kindness. Minister, regarding those people that have manipulated their meters to not purchase electricity the right way, what will be the implications? Because we have seen in the past that when you come forward to say that this is what I have done, there's a certain amount that you do need to pay. So when they do recode and say I need to recode, but I've been doing this thing illegally, what will be the implications for that?
Thank you, Tshegofatso.
Good morning, Minister. I'm Ramokgopa from Bloomberg News. Minister, just on your point about electricity tariffs, you said that you don't see South Africa realizing a 36-40% tariff hike. Just what are some of the interventions that are being put in place to ensure that we don't see a hike of that magnitude?
Thank you. Good day, Minister, colleagues in the room. My name is Recoding. I'm with the South African Wind Energy Association. I may be also to see that Sandy is here because, as you rightfully mentioned, you said you received around 136 of comments that were deemed to be substantive. I just want maybe a bit more elaboration on determining that substantiveness. And what would be how that process was sort of run, but also in terms of the stakeholders that eventually emanated from that, that will as sort of targeted stakeholder engagements. If those processes, seeing that that will be running, I think, in the coming weeks. Thank you so much.
Very good morning. My name is Kaja Wadawadi from the SABC. Mine is on the deadline where this metering is concerned. It's been about 2.1 million in 4 days. I want us to talk about the practicalities of Eskom having the capacity itself to complete this process in accommodating this 2.1 million people in the coming 4 days. And also just around the challenges that, as Eskom have experienced as you embarked on this process. Maybe give us a sense of what you're coming across and how then would you like the public to help you here as you go about this pre-coding and this metering process. Thank you.
Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Minister, on the IRP, you basically announced a further process in addition to the processes that you announced earlier. This is on a document that's almost a year old from publication, includes assumptions that are more than a year old. Is it not really better to withdraw it, redraft it, and reconsult it? It was never really properly consulted in the first place. Why are you not looking at that as an option? The assumptions must have been radically changed in terms of the EAF, radically changing technology costs, etc. Then there's also a legal clock ticking on the IEP. That hasn't ever been drafted by government. And what does that mean? If you kick this can down the road a little bit further, what does that mean for meeting the IEP public consultation and the deadline that's legally outlined? And then you talk about a tariff setting process or consultation that you're doing in parallel. In setting up a parallel process to the regulatory process, are you not, one, undermining the regulator, two, undermining the hearings that you say that people can still participate in, and also opening up yourself to a legal challenge, seeing that it's outside of the regulatory process that you'll be setting this tariff? Thank you.
Thank you very much for all of the questions for this first round. I think we will start with the KRN questions, KRN related questions, because we've got, or rather, let me say we'll start with the IRP. Let's start with the IRP questions because we've got less questions there. And then there I will request Dr. Mate to just say a few words in response to the questions, but that will also be sort of beefed up at the end by Minister after Monde has also responded to some of the questions on the KRN rollout.
Thank you very much, Tsakane. Morning, Minister. Morning, media representatives. There was a question related to the IRP, raised by Clifford from Sawea, how substantive was determined.
I think the minister spoke to this question. These are either individuals or organizations that made written submissions. Some of them provided additional information that was not necessarily considered, and some provided additional data or additional alternatives that needed to be considered. So that's how the process of determining substantive submissions was made. What has happened since then, the 4,000 odd inputs that was received, and then the 136 substantive submissions that were received, they went through a process of review. Out of that, and I think it also answers the question that was raised, I think it was Terence. Out of that, the input assumptions for the modeling purposes has changed in some cases. So we have taken the latest input assumptions, and also the data. Additional data was received from the likes of ESCOM and other organizations, and of course the performance of ESCOM has changed. So all of that was taken into account. So in a way, it's almost like remodeling. But this will be shared next week when we start the targeted stakeholder engagements. Maybe for the benefit of those that are in the room, we are starting the physical session on Tuesday, and it will happen in Pretoria at the CGS auditorium. We will be issuing the media announcement probably tomorrow, indicating all the details around those engagements. Then there was a question again from Terence around the IEP and what does it mean now that we are concluding this IRP. The IRP is an input. By the way, the IRP will be issued as an IRP 2024. It will not be IRP 2023. So it's almost like a new IRP based on what has happened in the last 12 months or so. So the IRP 2024 will be an input to the IEP. The process of re-looking at the IEP has started. I'm sure at the right time the department will communicate that, and Sanedi will be part of that process of revisiting the IEP. You'll recall that there was a draft that was never concluded, so we will go back to that process. But it's not only the IRP that's an input to the IEP. There are other master plans, as you may be aware, that become an input to the IEP. So the revised IRP 2024 will become an input to the IEP. The notification, I think I've addressed that. We will be issuing the notification for the invites next week. The first meeting will take place on Tuesday. It's a physical meeting. We will make an option for hybrid as well. So for those that cannot join, they can join virtually, followed by a series of virtual meetings. So on Tuesday, it will be a half-a-day session. If necessary, we'll do it the full day. We will be available, and the technical team will be available. By the way, I must commend the minister for simplifying the modeling process. I think when he was explaining what exactly transpired, I think even myself, I was re-educated. So I must comment. I hope the media colleagues were also educated. Sakana, I think I've covered most of the questions. If there's anything that I've missed, I'm happy to come back. Thank you.
Morning, Minister, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I think there were two questions related to the issue of the key revision number exercise that we're currently dealing with. One was that what is the implication to the people that the Minister spoke about as being zero bias? And the second one from Katleawen related to ESCOM's capacity to deal with the 2.1 million. Let's start with the first one. Yeah, we have been sitting with this problem for some time, for a very long time, and we are dealing with it as part of normal operations. We all know in areas where we live that there's illegal connections, there's meter tampering, there's people that buy from what we refer to as ghost vendors. We know that, which just could not get the scale of the problem. Now we know the scale of the problem. It relates to the 2.1 million people that the minister spoke about. And yes, I think what ought to happen is we require just those people to come forward, present themselves, and say, "Here I am. I know now you know me. That I have not been particularly good, and I'm very much sorry. I'm going to atone going forward." And then the process starts there. I think the first thing that just needs to happen is that we now need to convert this person to Karen 2 so that we make them part of the fold, as the minister said. But then subsequent to that, we'll then to start to drill into each case on its own merits to say what is the extent. If there's a meter damage, the meter needs to be replaced. If there was temper, there's temper fines that goes with it. But the bottom line is those people will be part of Karen 2. So that really is the implication. Yes, there may be instances where there is a fine that temper fines that are imposed, and in severe instances where we need to have a full meter replacement, that also, as the minister said, has got a cost and it will take time. So it is important that people come forward now within these 4 days, so that we can normalize them and beyond that point rehabilitate the situation. With regards to the capacity for Eskom to deal with the 2.1 million, so we started this process in July 2023, going out into the media and really starting the project to get the conversion. So within that period, we have set ourselves up to be able to. We anticipated that we'll get to a part where there is crunch that we need to deal with the zero bias. We have set up. In terms of the channels that this can be done, we take note that there's different categories of people, of customers, those that that have got access to smartphones. We require those people to work through our chatbot, through our self-help channels, wherein they will just update their information, and at the back end we will then update that information. We've got teams that have been set up. I think for the last 3 weeks we've almost been working 24/7, myself as well, so in dealing with all of the queries that are coming through. What we have experienced is that we've got people that come through to our centers, through our customer hubs, wherein those people, again with different types of scenarios, some take longer, some are quick to deal with. But at this point in time, we have sorted ourselves out to be able to deal with the 2.1 million. Based on our assessment, the bulk of this 2.1 million, it's people that must just go and buy. When they buy, they will get their 2 sets of tokens. That's all that needs to happen. So it is important that in the next 4 days that those people just go and buy electricity. Now, if you buy and you get your token but you cannot load, then you call in, and then you'll be taken through the process. We'll assist you to get through the process. But all that it requires for now with those 2.1 million people, they must just go and buy the electricity at reputable, legal vendors. I must just say that in conclusion. Thank you.
I'm going to pair the. Thank you very much for the questions, by the way. I'm going to pair the Ntando question and Terence question on the tariff. So we are not running a different process or a parallel process. And thanks for asking the question so that I re-clarify myself. So I'm encouraging everyone to go through the NERSA process. That's how the dispensation is designed. So NERSA does an independent process. And then I'm saying that there are aspects of what the Eskom has submitted to NERSA in that 36% that are of a policy nature. So NERSA will consult on the basis of a given policy. But the policy holder is the executive authority, is cabinet. And this cabinet has set out to say that we want to reduce the cost of living. To the extent that those are of a policy nature, internally led by the Minister of Electricity, Energy and Electricity, and of course, invariably with the Minister of Finance, having done those consultations, we then submit to Cabinet and say, those policy aspects that influence the tariff, we think that they must be revised in the following manner to give effect to our desire to reduce the cost of living. And once Cabinet says, yes, we agree with you, I then make that submission to NERSA. So NERSA, in their final evaluation, then take into account that, in fact, the government has reconsidered some of the policy aspects. And of course, I'm not mandated to speak on issues that are of a tax nature, issues that have got fiscal implications. That's the domain of the Minister of Finance. And that's why we have to engage with him. And it's for him, within the totality of the fiscal framework, that he must make that determination so that collectively we go to Cabinet, because it can have other ramifications that are unintended. Another example is the fact that that fiscal support that National Treasury gave to ESCOM, amongst its conditions, it says that you must get to a situation where the pricing is cost reflective. So you will see what ESCOM does in that what is now public. They are computing the return on assets. So the general rule of thumb in the marketplace is that your return of assets should be about 10%. So ESCOM will show you that gradually they'll get to that point. But we're saying that in the light of the challenges that we are facing, can't you decelerate the process that it takes for you to get to that aspiration of 10%? But if ESCOM does that, then it's in breach of what Treasury is saying. And that's why then it's a call that must be made from this side, not by ESCOM. So that's all that I'm saying. Have you reached finality? No. That's something that must be subjected internally. Has nothing to do for now with the NERSA process. But to the extent that we then make the call, we then make that submission to the NERSA process. So it's not a parallel process. It's going to feed into that process. It's just that it's insulated inside the executive authority. Once we make those calls, then we make that submission. Then NERSA says, oh, the policyholder has come back and say, we're thinking of this differently. Then they factor it into that. And yes, and I'm not in a position to say where are we going to land, but you can't land at 36%. Having said all of the above, what does it mean? Business uncompetitive. Households won't be able to carry this. So you are running into a deeper problem. And that's why we say we must find a balance. What that number is will be determined by the NERSA process. We'll feed into that, having made this other policy adjustment internally to the extent that Cabinet, first Minister of Finance and going to Cabinet, they find it to be appropriate. And if those determinations are made, they are of a tax nature, I'm not the one to make that announcement. It's for the Minister of Finance to make that calculation, because the jurisdiction and the responsibility of managing the fiscal sits with them. And we've agreed on a fiscal strategy that reduces the debt and all of that. It's a three-pronged strategy, so it must be within that strategy. It's not for me, it's for me to make that submission and also illustrate what are the impacts on the South African economy in relation to, or to the end consumer, and then we can do a calculation on the South African economy and make the necessary submission. Yeah, I think we have exhausted the questions, at least the first round. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister, Dr. Mathe and Mr. Bala, for the responses and the clarity. I think, Vanessa, in the first round, I made an error by not coming to you to get the questions that have been shared with us virtually. So I will start with you, and then we will take the first round in the room. I mean the last round, sorry, in the room. So Vanessa, take us through, please. Thanks.
Thank you. We have 14 questions so far from the online platform. The first one is from William Korn from NetWeb24. Regarding the KRN update, entering the code that ESCOM has provided to check if a meter is updated to KRN2, results display a string of letters
consisting of the letter E. Is this a glitch, or how should users interpret the output to know the status of the meter? Another question from William Horn. The draft IRP 2023 published for comments in January had only one scenario that had projections based on increasingly improving EAF figures at ESCOM. However, in this scenario, the IRP stated that after 2030, when up to 10,000 megawatts of generation capacity will need to start being retired, a large amount of new generation capacity build projects will need to have been completed. Are these assumptions still accurate? And is there enough time to build 10,000 megawatts baseload generation? Wendell from Reuters. Last week's signing at Nexa. The last week's signing ceremony at Nexa, it was said that you are in favor of lifting the care and maintenance of block PPMR. When is this expected, and when does the department go to cabinet asking for this? A key aspect of PPMR going into care and maintenance was a lack of funding. How will this be overcome? For example, what funding does government need to get it going again? Especially for building a pilot project at Lübeck. And are there any discussions with countries such as China who are building their own small modulator reactors to assist in getting PPMR off the ground? Another question from Wendell. Has the underlying assumptions and modeling of IRP 23 been changed? How so, please? For example, are we moving the two timeline horizons in favor of just one longest outlook to 2050 as suggested by the minister? What substantive changes can be expected to the current document, and can you please provide some examples of these changes? When is the final IRP expected to be completed and to come into effect? That was Wendell from Reuters. Helmo from Independent Media. When will the IRP be available for the public? How often will the IRP be updated in future? The next question is from Shongisani from Times Live. Are there any municipalities or areas where the process is lagging behind? Can you confirm how many meters remain on TRN1? Have you flagged any municipalities yet to roll out the token identifier TLE project, or don't seem likely to meet the deadline? What will happen to consumers who have switched their prepaid meters after the November 24th deadline? Will their power be immediately disconnected? How does ESCOM plan to handle electricity supply to customers in informal settlements who may have switched meters and are unable to comply with the new metering system before the deadline? How often is ESCOM managing the replacement of tampered or breached meters, especially in communities with a high incidence of illegal electricity use? Will the new system prevent such issues in the future? These are all questions from Sholisani at Times Live. Next question is Chris Yeland from EE Business Intelligence. ESCOM has advised that about 2.1 million prepayment meters have not vended any electricity for ages, which indicates massive fraud, tampering, and bypassing of meters. And nothing appears to have been done on this, despite the fact that prepayment meter vending software has all the necessary facilities to detect consumption and token purchasing anomalies that would indicate fraud on individual meters. This must be costing ESCOM and municipalities, and by extension paying customers and taxpayers, hundreds of millions of rands each year. Why has this been allowed to go on for so long without attending to it? The next question is also from Chris Yeland, EE Business Intelligence. Can the minister please provide an update on the timeline to operate operationalize the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, to publish the Integrated Energy Plan in terms of the National Energy Act, to publish the South African Renewable Energy Master Plan, to publish the Gas Master Plan, to gazette a new nuclear power ministerial determination. Those are all questions from Chris Yemen. That's all we have for now.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. We'll take the last round of questions in the room. Do we have any follow-up questions? This is the last round. I'll take Katleo first, followed by Terence. Any other hands? Okay, so those are the last two questions in the room. Thanks. In that order.
Yeah, it's Katlego Logodi again from the SABC. My question on the challenges was not attended to in terms of the rollout process. What challenges have you been experiencing as you go about this process? That would kind of give us a sense of, you know, the 2.1 million that are still left behind where this process is concerned. Also, just touching on issues of informal settlements, how are you approaching the informal settlements where this process is concerned? Municipalities as well, what role do they play in helping you as well to close this gap where the 2.1 million is concerned? And the reason why I'm saying this is because we hear that there are people that are turned away from various offices. There's no capacity. So are we looking at you working 24 hours, so extending the hours of your offices as to meet this 2.1 million people? Another one is to the minister around the NESA process. As we see this process playing out, we hear of then the suspension here of the head of electricity regulation there at NERSA. Can the minister just take us into confidence as to what is happening here? What has led to his suspension? When can we expect then for someone to come into that space? Because this figure remains or becomes very important where then this consultation process is concerned. Can you just give us a sense of what is happening there where the suspension of this electricity herd at NESA is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the questions. I think in... Oh, Terence. So sorry, Terence. I'm seeing Vanessa also raising her hand for two more questions. And we wish to take all questions. So Terence, after you will take Vanessa. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Mr. Besides asking the National Treasury to give Eskom some wriggle room with regard to conditions, what other policy levers are you considering at the moment? And when exactly will these be communicated to NERSA and how? Because the determination date is set for the 20th, I think just after, I think the 20th of December. So if you're going to influence it, it has to be before then. And how will you also make sure that, you know, I mean, I think Eskom's only actually asking for a return on assets of 4% in the first year. But if you are going to be asking for lower depreciation, lower return on assets, etc., how do you do this in a way that they're not going to be driving up the Benz Kuman again for another bailout? Thanks.
Thank you, Terence. Vanessa?
The last two questions from Chris Yeland, EE Business Intelligence. Can the minister advise on the reasons for the suspension of the Electricity Regulator Board member of NESA and process for appointment of a new Electricity Regulator Board member? Will there be a transparent nomination and appointment process? The last question from Chris. Can Mr. Mondebala advise whether City of Joburg or City Power has brought its overdue current account payment up to date yet by paying the 1.4 billion that was due by the end of October 2024 as agreed to in the recent meeting with the minister? Thank you, that's all we have.
Thank you, Vanessa, and to everyone for all the questions. I think we will, in the same fashion as the last round of responses, we'll start with Dr. Mate, and then we'll go to Mr. Bala, who will give us the more consequential responses because people are concerned as to what will happen after the 24th. And then Minister will wrap up on all the responses, including the ones on the NERSA process, the signing that happened, and the suspension. Thank you.
Thank you, Sakane. If I miss any question, please remind me. Let me start with a question around the EAF scenario of ESCOM and what happens beyond 2030, the 10 gigawatts base load that we may be losing come 2030. Minister, it feels like we're now doing the stakeholder engagement, so I will not get into the details, but I'll talk at a very high level. I think next week we will unpack all the assumptions and what will happen with the results that we're seeing. But let me just say, I think gas will play a key role beyond 2030, and to some extent wind, renewable energy will play a key role, especially wind, because of the profile of the wind supply, and then of course nuclear, because it provides that base load. But I think this will unpack next week during the stakeholder engagement. Let me also indicate what we will do next week. We will first provide a summary of all the comments that we received, especially the 136 substantive submissions that we received. We will then unpack the revised assumptions and additional data that we received from the date when we stopped the public consultation up to where we are. Then lastly, we'll also share the results of the remodeling that has been done. We'll show the reference case and then the scenarios against that reference case. I think some of the questions will probably be answered next week when we unpack that information. Then there was a question from Wendell. The assumptions, the input assumptions have changed. Some of them have changed. But again, we'll unpack this next week when we do the stakeholder engagement. The issue of Horizon 1 and Horizon 2, that has disappeared. We're now modeling from now up to 2050. Of course, we will share what's going to happen in 2030, but indications are, because of the ESCOM improved performance, indications are that we've got a secured energy security up to 2030, but we'll unpack this information next week. Then the substantive changes from the previous IRP 2023 up to where we are now. Let me just indicate a couple, but again, next week we'll unpack this. The EAF has changed. The previous modeling was based on an EAF of around 52% and also not growing that much. So the EAF assumptions are now assuming above 60%. In fact, ESCOM is currently sitting at about 65%, if I'm not mistaken. And the minister has made it clear that he wants an EAF of above 70%. So those assumptions have been taken into account in the model. Of course, there's sensitivity. What if it drops? What if it goes up? But all of that will be unpacked next week. Then the compliance with the minimum emission standards. This is now adhered to, and you'll see it in the modeling, and also alignment with the ESCOM shutdown plan, hence the 10,000 odd megawatts that we're going to base load, that we're going to lose around 2030. I think the other one is around grid constraints. The modeling that has now been done, it's almost market-driven, supply-based. So the issues of grid constraints, we remember in the previous IRP 2023, there was the issue of the 14,000 kilometers of grid capacity that must be built. So you'll see a change around that, and we will unpack it next week in terms of the assumptions. And then the last questions that I have here: how often will the IRP be revised? I think now that we've got a robust model, I think every 2 years or 3 years we'll probably revisit. But you don't want to be changing the IRP often, because otherwise, for long-term planning, it becomes very, very difficult. But nothing wrong with the likes of the department and SANEDI in the background, revising the modeling and providing some insight or updates almost every year, whatever the case might be. But from a gazetting point of view, we would not recommend that we change the IRP very, very often. And then when will the revised IRP be published? I think the minister spoke to that. End of November, we're targeting to finalize everything. Then we follow the governance processes of taking to cabinet, network, etc. And that can take anything between 2 to 3 months. But I think the minister can unpack that. Let me stop there before I say too much, but wait for next week.
Thank you, Dr. Katleo, yes, my apologies, I did not deal with the issue that talks to the challenges. Yeah, I think one of the big challenges that we are sitting with at the moment is that in spite of the fact that we had anticipated that there was going to be a significant rush towards the 24th November date, yeah, I think it does remain a challenge, extending our capacity to actually help all the people that are in the queue. Another challenge that we had people that were buying legally so, but because of the completeness of the data on our system, we could not really locate them. So we had to start with those people first. So we've dealt with those people now. All of their data is sorted, it's updated. Those people are currently vending. So that took us a bit of time. So now the focus now is really on getting the 2.1 meters, 2.1 customers sorted. So maybe just to follow up on some of your questions, how are we dealing with the issues of informal settlement? The same way. We have got a process that we've established. We've got channels that we are directing people to go to. People do not need to go and stand in the queues like what we're seeing. But yeah, I think it is our experience that we always wait for the last minute to go and stand in the queue. There is no need to stand in the queue. People just need to go and buy electricity, and if they're struggling to load either their what is referred to as a key change token, which is the first 20-digit set, when they struggle to either input that onto the meter or their token, they then just need to get in touch with us, and for that they can go through our contact center. So again, there is no need to go and stand in the queue. But yeah, I think South Africans we prefer the queue. But even those that are in the queue, they will get helped, except that it has created a situation that we've got bottlenecks within those centers. But as the people are standing in the queues, there is somebody that's walking in the queue just to understand what the issue is and whether or not the people should be standing in the queue, or they can get help again through the self-service channels, and they get helped right there and there on the spot. Before then they are then sent home. So yeah, I think I've dealt with both your questions, all three of your questions now. Back to William and the code that we get, that some people are getting on their meters when they try to load. It could be a number of things, but what we've picked up is that when such a code comes up on either on your meter or on your display unit, it may mean that that meter does not belong to Eskom. Now, how does that happen? It happens in a number of ways. We do have situations whereby you've got the main meter that is registered with Eskom, and then you're subletting at the back, and then those people there, then you put prepaid that you buy from your normal hardware, and then those meters would then necessarily not be registered to Eskom. So it may happen like that. It can also happen, specifically with the display units, that on the display unit, if it's not paired properly with your meter, then it's not picking up what the meter is, what the meter says it should be showing. So again, it's something that we need to look into to make sure that we understand the problem. Just to Chris's question, Has City Power or City of Johannesburg paid Humonde the 1.4 billion? The answer is no. They have not yet paid. Okay, another question from Chris on the 2.1 million. It's a problem that has been with you. What have you done about it? Why have you waited so long to act? And yeah, it is a challenge that Eskom is facing, not just Eskom, but all the other distributors. The issue of the culture of non-payment. Yeah, that's what we're sitting with. Now, what we have learned is that people prefer to pay somebody else if it's either government or an Eskom issue. So they're okay paying these ghost vendors, but they're not okay to pay Eskom. So it's an issue that we're dealing with as part of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We conduct meter audits where we've identified these challenges to be existing. We do issue temper fines. We do replace meters on an ongoing basis. It is part of what we do. But yes, the problem is big, and it will require a societal sort of compact for us to get out of this culture of non-payment. So yes, it is a problem, and it's one that we need to confront, Chris. To Shonisani, are there any municipalities that are affected? The answer is yes. Any entity that is utilizing the prepaid system that is linked to the STSA association, it will be affected by this problem. We're using this technical, this technology and this technical platform that the minister has also indicated that it's got a timestamp. That timestamp is coming to an end on the 24th of November 2024. So if the municipalities are also part of that platform, they will have the same challenge. I do not have the numbers for the municipalities. We did explain what will happen if you have not been converted after the 24th of November. It simply means that once your unit run out, you do not have electricity, and that will need to replace your meter at worst. How often do you replace your meters? We replace as often as necessary, but obviously if the meter is faulty, it's replaced as part of our normal maintenance. But if a meter is faulty as a result of tampering, then we issue what we refer to as temper fine. It's called a remedial fine that we issue. The first temper, this is now I'm talking from an Eskom point of view, the first temper is a 6,095. If there's a subsequent temper, then it escalates along those lines. Minister, I believe I've answered all the questions that. Thank you.
Sorry, there was one around the working clock. Do you see you extending the hours to accommodate the 2.1 million, and also on the municipalities? I mean, I asked around the challenges because in Soweto, there are people that have been cut off. What do they need to do because they can't update their meters? They've been cut off completely. So how do they actually go about this process? Is this part of the challenge that you've experienced, and how do you help them?
Yeah, so in terms of the working clock, I indicated earlier on that we have gotten to a point now where we're almost working 24/7 because a lot of the work is happening at the back end. So what we do in the day is to gather the data from customers either through through the self-service channels or through the people that are working in the queues. But subsequent to that data then needs to be worked on. That's what the guys that are working outside of the office, that are within the office environment, that's what they're doing. So if the question is that are you going to have 24/7 at your walk-in centers, the answer is we are not anticipating that at this point in time. We will monitor the situation and see how it goes. If there's a need to extend some of the hours, we will consider that at the time when the time is right. To your other question about the people in Soweto, we have got this process that we have embarked upon. Similar to the question about the informal settlements, we're implementing that process. The intention for us is that we are not going to leave anybody behind. So if you are there, you've given us your information, you are going to get helped one way or the other. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much. On the question of the full-time electricity regulator, it's a labor relations matter. The regulator has got the right of reply, so I will not ventilate those things in public. There's an established process, and I'm going to respect that process, and just to give the comfort that there is an acting regulator that has been appointed from the ranks of NERSA, the full-time regulator responsible for, I think, for gas, is the one who's responsible there. And then with regards to the issues around what are these policy levers, instruments, ROA, that the minister is considering in relation to the tariff, let's leave that process to me. We're dealing with all of that. I will not communicate my engagement with Treasury and Cabinet in public before they receive this. I'll communicate what the outcomes are, and we're alive to the timelines of NERSA, so we'll do that within those timelines. And then in relation to the lifting of the care and maintenance on the PBMR, I'm taking a report to Cabinet. It will answer the question in relation to what are the costs associated with that. So allow me to do that, and once we have done it, then I'll be able to communicate with you how we intend to address that issue. But what we're doing, we have accepted, is that SMRs are the future. There's about 50 to 60 of SMRs that are in different SMR technologies that are different stages of concept. I think it's only the Chinese that are advanced. We know that we've got the capability, and in fact the genesis of the current generation of small modular reactors is the PBMR. We have sunk over 10 billion, 12 billion rands into that program, abandoned it for reasons that were explained at the time. We think that we need to exploit our skills, exploit the accumulated knowledge with regards to nuclear technology over a period of time. And that's the case we're making to Cabinet. And this must also be read within the context of what's going to be the technologies that will be powering the world going into the future. We are convinced, and in fact, if you look at a number of reputable publications, they do place SMRs as a top of the pile in relation to resolving energy poverty in the world. 600 million people on the continent don't have access to electricity. The fact that I think the next wave of industrialization will happen on the continent, and industrialization is resource hungry, energy hungry, so we think that there are vast opportunities. So we're making a case there. So we see this not just a technology, but we see this as how we can be able to diversify, if you like, the economy of our country, building on existing and known capabilities of the country. I think that's the point we are making. And that also speaks to the MOU that we had signed with the Chinese, signed with the South Koreans, and an entity from the US. So you are looking at opportunities on the front end of this nuclear fuel cycle. We have been concentrated on the back end, or going to the back end. We have been concentrated on the downstream applications. So we want to go upstream. Just the other day, we were considering some of what we consider as critical minerals. So if we were to go this route and work on the capabilities that we have and the capabilities that we want to nurture going forward, then it means that the uranium should be classified as a critical mineral for the country, for reasons that we are making in the case for lifting care and maintenance of PBMR, and how we see the future of nuclear going into the immediate future, and of course far into the future, and also in the context of the transition, the energy transition across the globe. We know that Germany had challenges in relation to its generation capacity. They were importing a lot of electricity from France, the neighboring France, and we know that what anchors France nuclear capability really, I'm saying any electricity generation capacity really is nuclear and hydro. So that's proven uses. We know that the Americans are going full steam in relation to SMR technology. We are beginning to see that a lot of tech companies are investing in companies that are exploring these SMRs for purposes of powering their data center. So that's the future. So the future is clearly mapped out. And the question about the role and place of SMR has been answered. So you are now beginning to answer the questions of what are the costs associated with that, and with the evolution and the maturity of that technology, we are confident that it's going to come down. So SMRs are the future. We will not want to be left out of that, especially having invested a lot of resources and money into that capability. And in fact, if you go to the International Atomic Energy Agency, I mean, just the other day I was in Vienna, the annual meetings there. I met a lot of South Africans that are working for the EIIA, significant number, all of them trained at NEXA. The team that is running this nuclear program in the US invested, received significant pool of investment from private sector companies, tech companies. Is led by people who are trained PhD graduates from University of Pretoria, the then University of Potchefstroom, now University of the Northwest. Almost 80% of them, when I sat with them, they trained at NEXA. So that's the capacity that we have. And there's a whole range of, and then we know that the Gulf states are also exploring going that route. We know that for a nuclear generation capacity, nuclear to power uses, and also we know that Egypt is advanced stage of 4,800 megawatts, I think, of nuclear to power. South Africans are the ones who are leading in those spaces. So it's South Africans that have been exported to the rest of the world, when in fact we have invested in them. And because the build program then was absent, so it's a natural instinct, you look for opportunities somewhere. And some of these countries have seen the kind of investments we have made, the capability and capacity of these individuals, invited them there. The state invested in their companies. Look at what's happening now. It's exploding across the world. So we will not cry over spilled milk. So we're trying to find ways of how we can recover way behind the curve. And that's why these MOUs are important in that context of resuscitation of, if you like, the nuclear program in the country. And of course, at the advanced stage, the third reactor that is at NEXA, mainly for isotopes. Our major client is the US. So you can see the capabilities that we have. So the biggest client of NEXA is the US. So huge capabilities that we have. Again, they were looking for extension of life of the Safari. So I'm confident that we'll get it from the NNR, and then we'll be making investments there. We will announce at the right time. The team has already subjected itself to the internal process of government budget facility for infrastructure, and we know that it's being looked at favorably, and I'm sure that at the right time, the Minister of Finance will make that determination. And in relation to the operationalization of the ERA, we have just signed to the President, recommended the start date of the operationalization. There were issues we were resolving with SALGA. We had agreed on our best to resolve it. The President has agreed to that. So I've formally written to the President suggesting the date of operationalization. Now it's not in my domain. The President will make that call. And then it will be made known to the public. And what is important is just the fact that the President appreciates the urgency of this coming into operation, and I'm confident that the President will apply his mind accordingly, as he does all the time, and then make a determination on what we have proposed. On the nuclear determination, I did say that I've already put together the panel. I'm just going through the internal process just to get the nod from the president, and then I'll announce. But what I can say is the following. It's men and women with impeccable reputation from across the globe. And this is important because we want to maintain, protect, and enhance the integrity of this procurement process so that everyone knows that these are people of solid standing, proven track record. You will see when I announce them from across the globe. And we are beyond reproach. So it just gives confidence to what we are doing, advising on the pace and scale, so they will do that. And then the other conditions were placed. These are people who are drawn not from vendor countries. So those countries that we know are going to make a submission when we announce the nuclear bill program are not part of the panel for obvious reasons, because we don't want someone to be on the panel and just being predisposed towards a technology from his country or her country of origin. So we know if you were to go out on tender, we know the following countries are going to respond. China will respond, South Korea will respond, and France will respond, and America will respond. So we already know these are the four. If we had not abandoned our program, I'm sure South Africa would have been one of those who are responding. So we know these are the four countries that will respond. So we'll not draw from those, but we'll draw from a pool of impeccable individuals, just to show how confident we have, the confidence we have on this bill program, and the fact that nuclear is part of the future. I want to emphasize it is part of the mix going into the future, and the world is going in that direction. But it's important that when we go out, the process is transparent, is credible, and we are able to answer the question emphatically on the pace and scale that we can afford. And this team will help us to answer that question. It's invested in the resolution of this for reasons that are obvious, because we are talking of a mix. It's not one over the other. That's the transparency that we want, and that's the credibility now that we are introducing in this bill program to ensure that there's high degree of confidence. We have made the point on the gazetting of the IRP. I'll go the first quarter of the year, go to cabinet, because the team would have concluded their work now by 30th of November. The next cabinet, the last cabinet of the year, I think is first week of December. So it's not sufficient for us to go through the cabinet cycle. We'll find expression in the first quarter, and then as Dr. Mati makes the point, then we're talking IRP 2024. And really, as I conclude, I want to say to the 2.1 million people, just present yourself. Beyond the 24th, there is very little that I can do as a minister. And I can already anticipate that they'll be alarmed, aggrieved at ESCOM. ESCOM has done everything possible. So notwithstanding that explanation that Mondes gave, just to go back to Katle, remember that don't measure the 2.1 million outstanding for the period being the next four days. The 2.1 million had an opportunity for the past 8 months. That's the important point. So the opportunity is not extended now the past 8 months. If they had bought electricity somewhere there in the last 8 months, there will not be this problem. So what I can tell you, standing here, the great majority of the 2.1 million people have not bought electricity in the past 8 months. Go to their houses, the meter is there. Go to the houses, the lights are on. Ask yourself, how is that possible? The only plausible response is that they've bypassed. And of course, there's a valid question that came, I forgot from, maybe it's, was it Chris or Terence? Chris. Saying, but you have seen it over time, what have you been doing? Monday, I want to say that the team at ESCOM, and I know of municipalities, they've been fighting this battle. There's been just a vast proliferation of this zero bias, ghost vendors, whatever you choose to call them, but essentially people who are bypassing the system. So there has to be an intensification of that effort. And this transition into KRN2 helps that process. But Monday and the team will be invested in ensuring that we are ahead of the curve in technology terms. And we are going to help municipalities. I think that is important. I said the last time municipalities are owed collectively 340 billion rands. And on the other side, they owe ESCOM 90 billion rands. That's huge. So we have to work with them. We'll work with the sector. We will not bash municipalities. I have an appreciation of what they are going through. Myself being the former mayor, they are really doing everything possible. So we have to go after those who just refuse to pay. And remember, I'm separating those who are indigent and those who are refusing to pay. So those who are refusing to pay, they can afford, they are consuming, but they just refuse to pay. Then there's an indigent, people who genuinely don't have the means to pay because of objective reasons. There's a free basic electricity, and we will say we're going to come back on how we're going to subsidize the consumer directly. So we're not going to go through a municipality, we're going to go direct to the consumer, because what we have picked up is that it goes to the municipality in the form of a grant and doesn't reach the end consumer, when in fact the intention is meant to subsidize the end consumer. So we'll do all of that. But the plea is at 2.1 million, just present yourself. Make the case. Of course, when you get there, the point is not to make your case. They recode, and then after we sit with you, we are versa, and then they will make a determination case by case basis. But let me tell you why this is important. Let's take the 4.9 who have already recoded. It means that the 4.9, just on the ESCOM consumers, they are subsidizing 2.1 million people. So the victims is not 2.1 million people. That's the point. It's the 4.9 million people. And that's the tragedy of the conversation at home. When someone is really offending, someone is offending, and then someone is a diligent payer, subject himself or herself to the process, and all sympathies on someone who's offending. There will be genuine cases, and don't misinterpret me. But we know where we are seated, the vast majority are simply not paying. It can't work that way. All of us are under serious economic stress, strain, in fact. But people make an effort to pay because they are consuming. Others choose not to. And then the blame is put on ESCOM and municipalities. It can't be really. Yes, we can have a different conversation on the cost. That's a different conversation. Others are complaining about the cost. They are fighting us. They are making the submissions, which I understand, and yet they pay. And others says, no, we'll find a back route. You are given 8 months to do that. 4 days to go, then you come out and say, no, the time is not enough. We have shared with you what to do. Come again next time this week, you will see. There will be a significant number that are still outside. And of course, we have to pay now that we are going to replace the meter physically. It's a cost associated with that. So I'm just saying, being diligent and doing that, it's important that we are able to set the record straight. I tell you, we don't resolve this problem, the distribution industry in this country collapses. Municipalities will not be able to discharge their constitutional obligation. I really empathize with mayors. They are having a very, very difficult task at their hand. And people just choose not to pay. But then you'll pay other things. We'll pay our DSTV, we'll pay our cell phone contract, we'll pay our, and then we refuse to pay this side. It just can't work that way. We are all under difficult conditions. So that I admit, all of us. And of course, for low-income households, it's even severe. And I can tell you, go to old townships. It's the gogos and the like. The first thing they do is to pay for their municipal bill. Those of you who know, when you go, you have your grannies, your aunts who are much, much older. That generation now, they are 75%, 75 years plus. They tell you, Wanaka, opatetse rent. They start there. And then as the youngsters, and all of that, and then we forget to pay. I am not trivializing this. It's a serious problem. The municipalities will collapse if we don't do that there. So we urge the 2.1 million. Ziveze will not ask you a question, or we'll record, and then after we'll come. Let's sit, let's have a conversation. But thank you very much, Tanya.
Thank you very much to the Minister, Mr. Bala, and the doctor and the entire panel. Colleagues, we've come to the end of today's media briefing, but the Minister makes a very important point, and I hope it really gets across, because we have been receiving a lot of queries about the matter. So, colleagues, with that, I think we'll... Yes, Vanessa? Is it the last question, the question from Chris Yelland? Okay. Please, yeah, you can air it just before we conclude.
Okay. The Minister and the IPP office have been very clear about calling in the bid bonds of the REIPPP headwind of 5 bidders that failed to achieve commercial and financial close. Please, can the Minister equally clarify, have the bid bonds for the 3 car powership projects been called in, and is car powership opposing this through legal action?
Next time when we close, we close. The general rule, I've made the point, is the government on the one side provides guarantees. So if ESCOM were to fail to make its obligations, then the project sponsors will call on those guarantees. What happens on the right must happen on the left. I've made the point, we are going to call on those guarantees. On which entity, and I just don't know, the IPP will say that. I have said to the IPP, going to call on those project bonds. If they take us to court, let them take us to court, we'll fight it there. There's a reason why it's in the contract. It's because you are legally obliged, once you sign the contract, to meet the conditions of the contract. So everyone will be subjected to that. Ourselves, in terms of the provisions on the contract, and the project sponsors. So it's applicable to everyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister. That's very kind of